Well, good morning. Welcome again. I thank you for coming here this morning to encourage me, to encourage one another, and to praise the Lord our God. For those who do not know me, my name is Steve. I'm one of the pastors here, and as Pastor Jared says every week, we want to help you to know this Jesus and to follow him. Today is Family Sunday, so we are blessed to have the children worship with us this morning. And we are in a sermon series taking a look at the epistle of James, the half-brother of Jesus. And as we read, I'll be looking at the first 4 verses of chapter 2 today. James has been telling us to not just read the word, but to apply it to our lives, to live it out. And I thank Wally for his heart, that the Lord put upon his heart to reach out to folks in Tennessee that are suffering. And I thank all those, Gus and everyone else who's been involved in that to try to get help down to those folks. That is what we are called to do. That is what the Lord tells us to do as we love our neighbors, and to step out in faith, to show that love, to do that love. So, I would say the underlying foundation of what James has been saying thus far, and I think will be throughout his epistle, is that he's teaching us that we are to trust. We are to trust God, no matter what our circumstances are. We are to trust that he loves us, right? That he loves you, that he cares for you, and that he has a plan for your life, which brings glory to him and tremendous blessing to you as his child. So whether we are rich or poor or healthy or sick or tall or short or slim or stout or man or woman, blonde or brunette, dark skin or light skin, slave or free, Jew or Gentile, there is a perfect plan behind who you are. You are each a unique creation and highly valued. So valuable that Christ came and died for you, so that if you believe, you can spend eternity with you. So to begin, I want to play a game. So I have a slide, and our first slide, I want everyone to imagine, I want you to imagine that you're walking down the street and someone comes up to rob you. And you run away, you get away from this person that's trying to rob you, and you see 2 people on the street, these 2 people here. Now, who do you run to for help? The guy in the police uniform or the criminal-looking guy with all the tattoos? Who do you run to for help? Now, I'm going to go to a second slide here. Now imagine you are sick, right? You're sick. Now, do you go see the older guy with the stethoscope? Or do you go visit this handsomely dressed teenager? Who do you go see if you're sick, right? Now, for the third slide, imagine that you were made team captain, right? There's 2 team captains, and you are now choosing people to be on your team. And this is basketball now. So you're choosing basketball players to be on your team, and it's down to the last 2 guys, and it's your choice. Who do you choose? Do you choose the guy on the left who's 7 feet 2 inches? Or do you choose the guy on the right who's 5 foot 3 inches? Who do you choose for your basketball team? Now let me look at these slides one more time. So the first slide, many of you may know that the guy on the left is an actor. He's Tom Selleck, and that's a picture of him in acting as a police officer in the show Blue Bloods. I don't think he'd be much help if you were running away from someone trying to rob you. I mean, he might. The guy's relatively, he's older than I am. I don't know. But interestingly enough, the guy on the right, his name is Jay Dobbins, and he is a special agent who worked undercover. He actually did more than 500 undercover operations in his 27-year career as a special agent with the ATF. Most notably, he infiltrated the Hells Angels motorcycle gang in Arizona. So that's him there. That's a real cop who would actually be able to help you. Now, without knowing that, judging by what he looked like, you wouldn't think that he'd be a guy that would help you if you were getting robbed. Now, the second slide, the person on the left, for those of you who are old like me, you remember that's Dr. Marcus Welby, MD, who's played by the actor Robert Young. He is not a real doctor. So if you were sick, I don't think he's going to be able to help you too much. But this young kid on the side here, and I'm going to butcher his name, Balamurali Ambati. He initially attended high school at Baltimore Polytech Institute before transferring to Baltimore City College, graduating in 1989 at age 11. He graduated from New York University at the age of 13. He graduated from Mount Sinai School of Medicine with distinction at the age of 17. Scoring above 99% on his national medical boards and becoming the world's youngest doctor in 1995. Who would have thought that if you were sick, that would be the guy that you'd be better off running to? Now, this third slide now. The guy on the left is another actor, doesn't play basketball. He passed away, I think, relatively recently. His name was Richard Keel. And he was 7'2", 7 feet 2 inches. He probably most people know him for playing the part of Jaws in the James Bond movies, and Lurch, I think, and the Addams Family, if you remember back in the day. But the guy on the right actually played for my college alma mater, Wake Forest. He is indeed 5'3". His name was Muggsy Bogues. He was the shortest player ever to play in the National Basketball Association, the NBA. Bogues played point guard for 4 teams during his 14-season career. He would have been the wiser pick for your basketball team. Now, we've heard the statement before, don't judge a book by its cover. But we all looked at that and we all judged based on the outward appearance of each one of those people. And most of us, I think, would have been wrong. Because what's on the inside of the book, we don't know what's on the inside of the book. The cover can be flashy and look great, but the story on the inside could be awful, right? Or you could have a kind of a plain cover, but the story on the inside be awesome, right? We don't know. We don't know the story. You know who does know the story? God knows the story. God, in fact, knows the inside of every person. In fact, we see this throughout the Bible, that this is something that is part of God's attributes, is part of who he is. There's this great story in the Bible located in 1 Samuel 16. And the Lord speaks to the prophet Samuel, right? And he tells him to go to a man named Jesse, who lives in Bethlehem. Now, God has chosen one of Jesse's sons to be king of Israel. And Samuel is supposed to go there and anoint the future king's head. So Samuel goes and he meets with Jesse, and one by one, Jesse, the father, brings out 7 of his sons. Strong, capable, good-looking by appearance on the outside. Men looked like they'd be perfectly capable in being the king. But the Lord tells Samuel, not this guy, for each one that he brings out. In fact, the Lord had told Samuel not to make assumptions about who the king might be based on outward appearances. He says this to Samuel. He says, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Humans do not see what the Lord sees, for humans see what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." So finally, Samuel asked Jesse, he goes, is this all of your sons? And Jesse says, no, my youngest son is out, tending the sheep. And so they went and they got the youngest and smallest of the brothers, and his name was David. And the Lord told Samuel, he's the one, anoint him. So from a human standpoint, even David's own father didn't consider him a possibility for king. He was considering his age. He was considering his size. But then again, God looks at the heart and not the outside appearance. God looks at the man's character. And of course, that famous quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., understanding this about God, wrote the same thing. He says, "I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, the outside, but by the content of their character." You see, when you judge from outward appearances, it leads to all sorts of evil, all sorts of isms, right? Racism, sexism, anti-Semitism. The list goes on, and that list includes favoritism. And this goes against the very nature of God, because by nature, God is impartial. And there are many scriptures to show that. Deuteronomy 10:17 says, "For the Lord your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, showing no partiality and taking no bribe." And if you remember from our sermon series on the epistle to the Romans, we learned that Jews and Gentiles, are equal before God. Romans 2:9-11 said, "There will be affliction and distress for every human being who does evil, first to the Jew and also to the Gentile. But glory and honor and peace for everyone who does what is good, first to the Jew and also to the Greek or Gentile. For there is no favoritism." There is no favoritism with God. God shows no favoritism between Jews and Gentiles. He shows no favoritism between free or slaves, right? Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5-9. Paul writes, "Slaves, obey your human masters with fear and trembling in the insincerity of your heart, as you would Christ. Don't work only while being watched as people pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing God's will from your heart. Serve with a good attitude as to the Lord and not to people, knowing that whatever good each one does, slave or free, he will receive this back from the Lord. And masters, treat your slaves the same way without threatening them, because you know that both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him." Do you see the trust there? Can you see the trust that a slave must have? Trust in God for the circumstances that he has been put in, to believe that there is a purpose, that there is something greater behind the scenes, a plan. Jesus, God, is impartial, and all are equal before him. His love is unconditional. There are no conditions placed on Christ's love for you. And if we're to be like him as followers, then we too must be impartial, showing no favoritism. We must love in this way. For favoritism is a sin. In our scripture today, verses 3 and 4, James writes, "If you look with favor on the one wearing the fine clothes, the one with the gold ring," right, as it says earlier, and say, sit here in a good place. And yet you say to the poor person, you stand over there, or sit here on the floor by my feet. James writes, haven't you made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts or evil motives? I mean, we know that it's evil, right? When it's obvious, right? There was this movie, I don't know if some of you saw it, called Mean Girls. And it was about a group of high school girls who were cool, right? They were the popular girls. And if you wanted to be someone, to be noticed, you need to be part of that group, right? I remember going through stuff like that in high school. Yeesh. But these girls, they were ruthless. They were ruthless. I mean, if you didn't match their criteria for what your outer appearance, was, like how you looked, how you dressed, what clothes you wore. I mean, they were ruthless to others, to outsiders, right? There's this pic of one of them in the cafeteria. She was yelling at this poor girl who went to sit at their table. She goes, "You can't sit with us." Again, we know that, that bothers us. We know that's obviously wrong. We wanted, when you watch the movie, you're like, oh, I can't wait till they get theirs. And they do. But we can see it in other people. We can see it when it's obvious. But do we see it in our own lives? I once saw a social media post of one of the bigger churches, right? This popular, cool church, right? And it had a picture of the pastor with, some famous person. And it said, hey, look who came to worship with us today. There's this pop star or some famous actor, right? James calls that evil. There's an evil motive behind that. And you don't think that it's a big deal, right? Until you really think about what's the motive behind that. What's actually happening there? You are taking the spotlight off of God and putting the spotlight on self. As a church, you are to glorify God. As people of God, we are to glorify God with our lives. And yet this church is glorifying the church itself, or the pastor. Maybe the pastor, is thinking, hey, I'm so great that I got all these movie stars coming to my church. Or the band is so great that look at all these musicians, these famous musicians, come up to my church. It's an evil motive to get people to come for the wrong reason, so that the church grows and more money and whatever else is behind that. See, the motive behind favoritism is to gain something for self at the expense of someone else. And we don't elevate self. God is the one who does the honoring and the elevating and also the humbling. Remember what I said in the beginning of the message, that whether you are rich or poor or healthy or sick or tall or short or slim or stout or man or woman, blonde or brunette, dark skin or light skin, slave or free, Jew or Gentile, there's a perfect plan behind who you are and what God created you to be. Don't try to be something that you're not. You are each a unique creation, and you are highly valued. I want to close with a story about Gladys, I think you pronounce her name, Aylward. Gladys was born in 1902 to a working-class family in Edmonton, North London. And when she was growing up, she hated how she looked. She was short. She was only 4'10". And she had straight black hair. And all the popular girls in school, they were tall with blonde hair. She hated her outward appearance. But eventually she became a follower of Jesus Christ. And later on, as a follower of Jesus Christ, she felt called to be a missionary. She went to China and was known for her care of orphans. And when the Japanese invaded her region in 1938, she led over 100 orphans to safety. And though she herself was wounded and sick, she personally cared for each one of these children. She ended up in Taiwan in 1958, and she founded the Gladys Aylward Orphanage, where she worked until her death in 1970. I tell you this story because in her memoirs, she recalls the day she arrived in Shanghai, China. And she wrote this. She said, every single one of them had black hair, and every single one of them had stopped growing when I did. And I said, Lord God, you know what you're doing. That's a story I think we should all grab onto. There's a purpose for how each one of us looks. And for that reason, we don't judge ourselves for how we look, and we don't judge others for how they look. And we don't favor others because of how they look. You are made unique and special in God's image and for a purpose that has eternal significance. Judging outwardly, showing favoritism, and having feelings of not being valuable flies in the face of who God is and who he wants you to be.